that story. Papa came to Africa because he was a young fellow, and his sister Rose was living there, so his family sent him there. They wanted to make sure he didn't get into the army.
Wait a minute. His sister Rose wasn't living there.
In Africa?
No. Sister Rose came, Papa sent her Sister Rose.
I thought she was an older woman.
No, she's a younger woman.
Okay, Rose, I don't know about you.
But you know about Papa, how Papa came. My father came there because his father and his mother got married. It was a marriage of money and Torah. His father was very well learned in Torah, and his mother was a princess, Jewish princess. She liked to dress up beautifully and ride around in her beautiful carriage and wouldn't touch her hair, and he was so religious and so pious. My father was crazy about him. His name was Wattle Souza.
Never knew this.
And my father said that he adored him because he was so honest and he was so religious. My father used to wear the tzitzis, whatever you call it. My father wore that. He wore everything. While his father was alive, he was as religious as his father. And then when his father died, he said to his mother, he's leaving the country. And his mother said, wait. But then the war broke out. The Russians came in.
How old was Papa at this time?
Huh?
How old was he when he got to Africa?
16 years old, or 17.
And what was Papa's mother's name?
Chase, but Chase in English, but it was Chassa.
And you know,
Hassia.
Mother, you know his brothers and sisters' names?
Yes. He had a sister Rose, and he had twin sisters Ethel and Mildred.
His brother Aaron.
And brother
Aaron.
So his mother said to him, now there's a war, and mothers are cutting chopping off the children's
Mama's
fingers
brother.
hands to keep them out of the army. But before, you'd wait for that. Leave immediately. So he left Russia, and he came, and they called Elon. A Petroclane was his mother had that right. The only Jewish people get that are very well known and have a lot of money. And it's called Petroclane, and they have that on their window, and they can open up any kind of stores of business. My uncle had a jewelry store in Petrograd. So anyway, he left, my father left, and he went to Africa.
The samovar in his bag.
And he went to a boarding house. And when he came to that boarding house, there were a lot of boys waiting for jobs. I should tell that story to Zach. There were a lot of people waiting, young kids waiting for a job. And my father said, I'll take anything. I want to work. And they said, okay, you have a lot of dirty work to do, working in a butcher store, cleaning casings and cleaning the chickens and doing it. My father did everything. But he said, wait, the day will come when I have my own store. So he worked, and finally he saw a vacant store, and he opened that up.
But you have
all
to tell,
people started coming to him.
Mother, you have to tell the part about how the women were all, he made friends with all the women in the store.
Yeah, everybody loved him because he gave him extra piece of meat.
But he built up a clientele for his,
He
built up a clientele.
Of his own, yes.
Right.
And one of them was
And
my
this was a
mother's
kosher-
sister.
and this
Another thing she forgot, he was extremely handsome.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
And when my
Yes, he
father...
was. And it was a
loved-
kosher butcher store.
There's only one Jewish woman that used to come into the store. They were a very, very religious woman. That was my mother's sister. She was beautiful. Lottie. She was a very pretty woman.
But
She
when you
was
see her
short.
picture, you won't think so.
No, not now. Short and petite. And she...
That's all.
It was.
And Aunt Lottie, my father said to her, do you have anybody in your family that looks like you or is as nice as you are? And she said, Max, I want you to come to my house and be a friend of ours and family. And she introduced him to all, and they all loved him. But when he came to thinking about her little sister that just came there.
Do you have the picture of Mama with the basket?
No, you had it, my dear.
I
Sally,
gave it to
you have it. I have nothing. When Mama died,
It was a
yeah,
wonderful picture my
Yeah,
mother
Mom
had.
just said,
When she has
You
long
have it.
blonde hair like Zoe.
Pictures,
and
didn't she ever
and she
you
told me
have
the
all the
basket.
pictures. Susan knows. We haven't anything. You have everything.
What does she do with the basket? She's holding
She's
the basket?
holding
She was holding the basket.
Mother,
Marianne. She was
Mother.
just beautiful.
Mama was still in Riga when you saw the picture of her.
Huh?
Mama was still living in Riga when Papa saw a
Was sent
picture of
for
her.
her.
No,
that's right.
yes, that's right.
They sent for
Yes.
her, wasn't there?
She was
And Mama
only,
was still
she was
reading.
only
She was like 9 or something.
9 years old.
Mama wasn't at
They
Riga.
know, see, they know it. And my father said to her, "Hey, when is your sister coming in?" And she said, "She's coming, we're gonna put her in school,
The Riga's in
English
like,
school." My father said,
Mama wasn't, Riga
"I'm
was
not
a
at
city.
all worried about
Mama
that."
was
He
not
said,
in
"I'm
that
gonna put her
city.
through school."
She never
And
said
they
she
said,
was.
"Look,
She
you're
said she
our
was-
friend."
What was the difference
Oh,
of
so
age
you
between
like
them?
What?
The
The
difference of
ages,
age between them.
About 11 years difference.
Oh, 11 years.
And so my father said he really wanted my mother. She didn't look anything like my sister, like my aunt. Nothing at all. My mother was very tall, and my aunt was a little petite, thin little girl. But he didn't care. He liked Aunt Lottie, and he wanted somebody in the family just like her. And he could have gotten a lot of African girls because he didn't keep anything anymore. Once he left, his father died. He
Didn't
wasn't
care about
religious
Judaism.
anymore. No, he didn't. He wasn't religious anymore. So Aunt Lottie and all of them had them always come over to their home, and he was a lovely guest. He had no family, and they made him with one of their family. But when he wanted my mother, nothing doing. They didn't want any part of that, and he persisted, and he won. My mother fell in love with him. He was very handsome, and she said, "Anything you want to do for me." She said, "If you want me to stay, and you want me to stay with you."
Excuse me, you always said that he saw the picture.
Huh?
It wasn't that they told him about Lottie, but he saw
Yeah,
a
he saw the
picture.
picture.
Of what- of-
They got a picture of
Mother
they
said
all know. The Aunt Lottie got a picture from her mother, of my mother with the basket, like Sally had. This wonderful little picture. And so he was working. Meanwhile, he was very ambitious. He bought land in South Africa, and he started. Did you see the picture out of Africa?
Yes.
That's what our house looked like. And we had another picture that Sally has with me standing with my little brother. I don't remember, but I remember that picture, the one that died that Maury's named for. And on the other side were the two black girls that we brought, Eileen and Kike. They're in that picture, and that's all my mother left, and Sally has, and we never saw it. So my mother, he got everything ready, irrigated, and built
Oh,
this
stop.
beautiful.
First of all, Aunt Sally did not see those pictures, never.
Ah.
That's
Well,
not for
Aunt
the record, would be
Aunt
wrong.
Sally's memory's not good.
For the record, Aunt Sally's memory's not good.
Not in that case, you don't remember.
Mandy's not gonna wanna see you two fighting.
Okay, we'll hear just one version first and then the other.
But she is the only one that had those pictures. I don't have them.
All right,
Mama
go
left-
ahead with the story.
Sally,
Forget the
Mama
pictures.
Das
left
ist
the
doch
car.
You can say a point of
אבל
order.
זה קטעים
Tell her, forget the
לא,
pictures.
יש לה תמונות, זה לא
Get out of the-
Forget the pictures. Tell
out
the
of the
story.
closet.
Tell the story.
Okay, so my mother was willing. He told her that he was going to build this beautiful house for her, and he had servants for everything, and he had everything ready. And he used to come overnight in a train to see her, and then finally they got married, and the family came practically unwillingly because they didn't want her to get married.
Mother, excuse me. The store was in Cape Town?
No, nothing's in Cape
The
Town.
store was in Johannesburg.
And Kranz.
Johannesburg.
And where was the building,
Kranz.
The crow.
France, yes.
no, no, just for
Canal-
the
Canal.
record, just for the record though, what was the relationship between where the store was and where he was building the house?
היא בוט land.
How far away was it?
Oh, but overnight ride, I said.
It was a fast horse.
It was north of Johannesburg.
What?
It was north of Johannesburg?
I don't remember, Kenny. Anyway, it was an overnight ride. And
Don't
when
ask
he
questions.
finished it, that's when he got
No,
married.
sure,
I
ask
said that. None of, they came to the wedding, but they were unwilling. And so first they had my brother Mikey, then they had me. I came next, and then my little brother Warranty that we lost, he died when we came to this country, when we came to America. And my father and mother were very happy. My mother used to go to Cape Town for the summers, She went to Cape Town.
I thought you went to Durban.
Cape Town, wonderful holidays. This is when they were married.
Didn't you go to Durban?
Huh?
Durban?
Yes.
Not Johannesburg.
Durban isn't outside of Johannesburg. It's
That's it, but that's a resort, Durban. Is that you told me that's where she used to go to Durban?
Mama used to go to the resort.
In
all the
Durban,
time.
yeah.
Yes, in a hotel, I said that.
And what about Aunt Sally? She
Aunt
was also
Sally was a
good.
little tiny baby, she wasn't even
No, you
born
didn't
yet.
talk, you told,
She's
Mother,
6
you said that they had Mitchell, then they had you, then they had Morky,
Yes.
and then you didn't say
And then
anything.
Sally, yes, Sally didn't come
You
till
know
next
what?
night.
I want to offer Henny a reward if she has these pictures.
Who?
Henny,
You think
Mikey
she
may have
has-
them.
May, very well may have them. They were in Mama's closet.
I think
I-
Mikey has them.
Yeah, I bet he has.
I'll offer her. a
Okay,
reward.
let's go on with the tape and
All
not
right.
go wasting.
Oh, I'd give anything to see them.
Well, how much you want to pay for the reward, part of it?
Reward? Well, I'll let you know when he gets it.
No, I'll have to ask Henny.
Well, tell her we'll give her a good reward. You'll go half with me.
Yeah?
Okay.
Yeah.
$1,000.
Never mind.
500 from you and 500 from me.
Okay.
All right?
Maybe by the time, maybe 100.
$200.
Going, it is going.
So,
Talagang mas-
Elon, they, then, where did I leave off? Oh, where my mother and father were very
the
happily
ba- the-
married. And when Sally was born, the nurse came out, we were playing way up on top of a mountain in Africa, in South Africa, which was called Carnarvon. That's the name of the city, and the house was called Krans, that's actually Krans.
The mountains are called Table Mountains.
No, why do you mix that? Table Mountain is in Cape Town.
Dolly, be
We
careful.
came
You're
never
looking
near
into the camera.
Cape
Don't
Town.
get up. Don't look. You're looking at these taking it.
What do you mix Cape Town in? We didn't.
So what is
Sally
the
had
col-
a guest
Cape
that came.
Town's completely
Sally came,
different.
somebody
It's on the
visited her.
tip.
Did
Cape
you know
Town's
that?
the tip.
You have to tell the story about it.
What?
Your cousin that came from, to visit you in New York, and you took him just recently, 3 years ago.
Yeah, Russell.
And he didn't know anything about his uncle Maury and
He
Claire
didn't know
Bloom.
anything
He didn't
about
even know
the
Claire
family.
Bloom.
Mother,
Where's
wait a minute,
grandfather?
do you know why you were born in Bloemfontein?
Huh?
What was Mama doing in Bloemfontein?
What was Mama doing?
In Bloemfontein when she had you? Because you were born in
Yeah,
Bloemfontein.
I was born in Bloemfontein.
Yeah.
But no, but that's
Marysville.
Marysville. That's in Johannesburg.
No, Bloemfontein, Pure
I
Mexico,
mean,
the Orange Free State.
We have nothing about Cape Town.
I was born,
Cape
we don't know
Town's the
anything
tip.
about Cape Town.
On the-
Peter's
if you look at the
Marysville.
It's a
map of
cape,
Africa.
that's why it's called the Cape.
Why do you
If
always
you
put
look at
Cape
the
Town?
map
We
of
don't know,
Africa,
it's
it's on the,
different,
it's
Maury.
the tape.
It's a cape, it's a cape.
My mother used to, in the summer, she'd take all her children to Cape Town.
Cape Town?
Only for, at a hotel, that's all. None of us, we didn't live there, that was like a resort, okay? So then, one day, we were playing, my brother and I were up on a high mountain, and my mother had a nurse Elizabeth, a white girl. She came running out and she said, hurry up and come up. Your little baby your little sister was just born. And we ran up to the house, and there was that beautiful little girl, Sally.
But I was born in the Karoo.
Cut to Sally.
I'm talking about the crew.
Oh, you mentioned the Karoo?
Yeah, sure. Mom was born right in Krans. You were born in Krans. And we ran all the way down from the mountain. I almost fell down. My brother caught me. We were so excited. We came in, and there was this beautiful little girl.
Did you mention that it was a barren place, that Papa's house was one of the few houses there? There was nothing nearby?
No, there's nothing nearby. It was like the size of Texas. It was so big. You'd ride all around a whole day before you'd get there.
That's a little hyperbole.
And all these little houses where all the natives, where all the people worked. And I was telling Sally that they always teased me and tell me my father had slaves. My father, did you get the books? Were they in the closet?
What book?
All the little books that Papa left?
No, I never
My
saw
father
them.
had little books. I saw them. Little blank
Let's
books.
ask Mikey for
You
them.
know, little blank books. And he would write down
Too late.
3 goats.
We had them, didn't we have the books?
Huh?
We had the books, didn't we?
Oh,
No, we
Somebody
never,
had the
we
books.
never had any books. I never saw
Somebody
any.
had the books, I remember seeing
Huh?
them. I remember seeing them.
Not,
Maybe you heard the stories that you think.
he saw,
It's like a little blank book, notebook, little blank book. Like he'd mark down every man that worked for him, every native worked for him, would have enough for a week, an animal.
They'd be
And-
rationed out.
More, you can tell the story, I'm not going to go.
I'm sorry. I know it better
And
than
I
you,
knew
that's
from there, my father would dole it out to everyone. Everyone had enough for a week, you know, sheep or lamb, whatever, chickens, and then they loved pancakes.
Mealies.
Look, you interrupt her train.
Murray, go to your room.
You interrupt her train of thought. That's not fair.
It's not fair. It's not funny.
Okay, oh, that's not funny. It's very serious.
And there was a certain, like you make an omelet out of the ostrich. The ostrich is a tremendous ostrich egg, and the natives make delicious omelets out of it. They're like flat pancakes, and they gave them enough flour to make that, and they had everything. Enough castor oil to last. I love castor oil. That was a remedy. They all took that castor oil, and they all loved my father. They worked for him. Now I'll tell you a story about the natives. My father, again, what's so funny?
I'm not laughing. His daughter was laughing.
Go on. Is there
That's all
anybody-
alone, that's all.
This is funny.
Check yours.
It's not the full story, go ahead.
Father learned from the men that worked for him. A couple, they're very honest with my father, and they told him that there was a lot of
Excuse me.
the men that worked for him. They would tell him everything, and they said that, you know, Mr. Souser, there's a lot of your sheep killed. We can't account for it. There's so many. And they said, you know who did it? They said yes. These big coffers. You know what a coffer is? They're
Yeah.
big, tall natives. You've seen the movies.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
And these men were over 6 foot tall, and they ran around naked. They take and oil their bodies, their complete bodies, and they walked around like that. And they said, we have to ride.
Did you ever see a cover?
Yes, I did. And they said, you and him. You get me to laugh.
I've heard
He
about
said,
Mama
So
talk about
these
coppers.
big, tall men.
Uh-huh.
And they said, you know who they are, they're a gang. And we really don't want to go with you because we're afraid of them. He said, well, do you want to come or don't you? And they said, of course. And they got on a wagon, all of them, and they rode and rode and rode about 3 or 4 days. What are you laughing about? And when they got there, they all started ganging up on my father's men that he brought, and my father. And they were fighting, and as soon as they put their hands on their body, they would fall down and get up again, and they couldn't do a thing with them. So my father said, let's do this. Let's catch them with their feet, the bottom of their toes, and one of you put a rope around their ankles. And that's the way we're going to take them back to the city. My father didn't want to have them arrested or do anything. He wanted to bring them into Johannesburg and let them serve time because they were crooks, thieves. And so he got all of them. Every one of them caught them by their ankles. Wasn't that smart? Instead of fighting with them, you couldn't touch them because as soon as you put your hands on it, they'd come apart. You couldn't hold them. So they all of them roped them up, and they roped the wagon up, and they rode again. And these guys were screaming, we're going to kill you and do everything. He brought them right to the courthouse, and they were jailed. These bad men.
Tell the story about Mom in the Ring and about Tommy the horse.
Oh, that's cute. You know that one. Tell it.
No, I wasn't there.
Mild Christian.
What about
I think you should continue.
This has nothing to do with the one about the ostrich. The ostriches don't like to have their heads covered. And my father had...
Pardon. In the kibbutz where her father was, I saw a lot of ostriches once.
They have a big ostrich farm.
They do?
They have an
Well,
ostrich
these
farm.
ostriches were in a big corral. Do you know what a corral is? It's
Yeah.
a big enclosure. And it's all gates all around. You can't get out. And my father, the men were shearing them, and they didn't want their heads covered. They started kicking and they ran out. One of them escaped, and he started chasing Mikey, my brother, and me. And my brother said to me, lie down fast. He's a little kid. I think he was about 6 years old, and I was about 4. And he said, lie down. And I did. And my brother got kicked on the side of his eye, and he still has stitches where the ostrich kicked him. You saw the stitches, didn't you?
No, but I know your
Yeah.
story is correct.
Yeah. So we came home. My father said, "You had no right to you should have, both of you lie down and let the ostrich step over you." But Mike, you thought he was a big shot, and he kicked him with his back leg. And now Sally wants me to tell you about, which one did you want me to tell you?
I just want you to continue as you're going, whatever you remember.
About the little pony. We had a little pony, and he loved to get hats. He used to go after everybody's hat. We'd tease him and take a hat and hide the hat, and no matter where we put the hat, he would follow and to be his. No matter where we were, he would get the hat. And he came in, he looked in everybody's room, couldn't find that hat. And he walked around, and finally, my little brother, my smallest brother, that's the only memory of him, little Marky. He took him and he led him and he showed him just where it was. He couldn't find that hat, we hid it properly, so he couldn't get it. And he came and he walked in and he got the hat, took that hat, and we put the hat on him. And he was extremely smart.
The name of the pony was Tommy, right?
Huh?
Tommy.
Tommy, his name is Tommy, that's right.
Dolly, the story that I remember is Mama told me is that she was on a horse and she was coming home. And a big,
You're supposed to
tell me if I'm wrong.
All right, I'll correct you.
Correct me, because I may not be right.
No.
The story one of the stories I heard, that a tremendous big snake,
Oh, yes, that's a very.
I don't know what kind we would call it,
A
a
boa
cobra?
constrictor.
What was the
A boa
snake?
Black Mambo, I think it was.
It was a big snake,
Black Mambo.
jumped up in front of her horse. And the horse sort of leaned backwards because it was going to
Bucked.
turn her over.
It bucked.
And then the dog came running, and the dog killed the snake.
No.
No, that story is completely wrong.
And
See, that's why I don't tell stories.
No. My mother was sitting in the garden. I know
Not
that
on a
story.
horse?
Not on a
But it
horse.
was in
This
No.
one, she was on a horse when
Well,
she
this
told me
is a
this
different
one.
story.
Another horse.
That's another
My
story.
mother had a ring
She's in
on
the state.
her finger that you could
Sitting
see
in a chair.
at a distance.
Reflection.
Boy-
She's coming towards you.
And Boy Don Rowe was standing behind her.
And my mother sat in the garden, she was reading, and we had a wonderful man, Boy Domro. His name is Boy Domro, right? You remember that?
Right.
Boy Domro, that was always with my mother, taking care of her. And he came walk with a cane. He had the cane in his hand. And the snake was crawling very slowly. It was a big, long snake. We had it put in a den. They killed it and they cleaned it. And we had it in our den. I remember the snake. Big, fat, long snake. Tremendous. If he ever bit my mother would have been dead. And boy, my mother saw the snake getting closer to her. She's looking at her ring and she let out a terrible scream. And boy came running. And he said to my mother, "Bend down, get away, try to get away." And he took this cane and he killed the snake. This is terrible.
Mama told me this story a few times about riding her horse.
That might be another one.
It's another snake story.
a lot of snakes.
And Mama said that as she was riding and nearing her home, this big snake got in front of the horse, and the horse was frightened and sort of was going to throw her off. He was frightened that the snake was going to jump up and bite him. And then her dog, she was near the home, she had this big dog, German Shepherd,
Yes.
and the German Shepherd came running and saved her life.
Yeah, those are wonderful things that happen.
And then I remember the best story of all.
Which one?
Mom and Papa lived in a house, I don't know where, but they were away from everybody, very far. And at that time, Africa was bringing in Chinese
See,
labor.
when I said to you today, you know that story.
No, I don't remember, and
You
now I'm
don't
beginning
remember.
to
Okay,
see
let her tell now.
that they brought in Chinese labor. And they had these little pigtails, the
Cues.
Chinese cues, whatever you want to call them. And Mama's sleeping, and then she sees them peering through her window late at night, and Papa wasn't home. Papa was on a trip somewhere, buying horses or selling them. And this is in a remote place where nobody is, where she is now.
In Johannesburg, but outskirts of Johannesburg.
She's in an outskirts where there are no neighbors. And she looks through the window and sees the Chinese looking in on her. And she screams, and Boy Domino comes and saves her. Boy Domino.
I remember the tape, Sally, in the tape you told a different version of the story.
Yeah,
You said that you heard, Mama heard footsteps over
that's
her,
right. Over the
above her head, and she knew
That's
it.
right. That's right.
She
And
She
could have
didn't
heard
see
those-
them, she
Mama
heard,
said she found
She
the
could have
door.
heard those two.
And Mama said that the
I'll
door.
go along with the footsteps.
I think so they were, and they were living in a different place then?
They lived in a lot of different places.
there were escapees, weren't they, from a work unit or something?
Yeah,
They-
slave
Working-
labor. They were
No,
slave
no.
labor.
Yeah, they
They
were
were-
escapes.
Slave labor.
They
They
were
were
imported.
wild.
They were
Yeah, but they were
imported.
work.
You know, in the 1800s, they used to bring over the slave labor. You read about that in history. And they brought over the wild coolies. They were called coolies.
I don't know anything
And-
about that. He built one big house.
Yeah.
Well,
They
Dolly
lived
was
in
born in a different place. I was.
No, I was born. Yes, I was born.
I was born in the Crew. You were born in Bloemfontein.
Yeah.
Where was Mikey
But
born?
no, I was born in Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh.
And Mikey was born in the same place as you were.
In the Carew?
Yeah.
I got rid of you.
Good thing we don't have to. Dolly
Right.
was born in the United States.
So wait a minute. They didn't live in different houses.
They must have been traveling.
They
They
didn't
must have
live
been
in
traveling.
different houses.
The Chinese episode, they must have been because my mother
No,
describes it away
Mom,
from
when
everything.
the Chinese story, Mom was living, and before Papa built the house.
Oh.
But I thought he built the house before they got married. I thought they
Yes,
got married
that's right.
and moved
And they
into the
lived
house.
in this house
So
for
they
the
were living in sin?
summer. For the summer. And Mama, this is the remote, very countrified. No one ever came by or only for a short while.
At that
Yeah.
time, there were very few, the houses were far and few between. You'd have to ride your horse to the neighbor.
Okay. I didn't know. And what about the mule story?
The what?
The mule story.
Oh, that about me?
Yeah.
That I don't really know.
And you used to save Mikey all the time.
Mike used to bury me. I was a little baby, and he would dig a big hole, and I was playing with a doll. I was playing with a doll, and he thought it was the doll, and he put the doll, he thought he was putting me down like the doll with my doll, and I screamed out loud.
Shut up, doll.
Boy Domino didn't save me. I just,
That's after Mikey got kicked in the head.
I screamed, I said to Mikey, get me out of here fast. Little girl, 4 years old, can you imagine what I said? I don't know what I said. But anyway, the story that I remember, and it's a wonderful story, and I'm just trying to think, it's really something about.
The mules crossing the stream.
Hmm?
And you were crying because they were beating the
Papa
mules.
was-
Oh, that's another one. Oh, one time my father had bought a lot of mules. He was bringing them across, and the men at all sides were heading the horses. The mules are very stubborn.
They were fording the river, you didn't tell them that.
Huh?
They were fording the river with them.
They were on the river, walking through the river, and the men were beating them, and they couldn't get them to stop, to go. I mean, they pulled the harness and they beat them, and my father was supervising, and he said, "Go for it, let them go." He wanted them to get across, and I was hysterical. I was a little girl sitting nearby on the porch, and I kept screaming and crying, and I said, "Leave those animals, leave them alone, leave them alone. What are you doing to them?" My father said, "I'll tell you what they were doing to them. We're trying to get them across the river to send them out. And be quiet, because if you're not quiet, I'm coming back to you." And he came back and he gave me a good spanking, and I still cried. And I cried, and nothing helped. They kept hitting the horses, and they finally got them over the river, and I went home, and I never forgot that incident. It stayed with me all my life, really did.
For the
I think the
record,
cruelty of doing that to an animal, but that's what you had to do, because my father explained to me, he said, there's no other way but to beat them, because they're very stubborn people.
Well, mules.
for the record, this happened, the story starts in the 1890 or something like that with Papa Souser, and it continues in Africa, 1900 and something.
Why did they leave Africa?
Why did they leave Africa? I think Sally told me.
No.
Well, my mother, my grandmother, Hertzmark, which is so important. You heard my mother talk about Hertzmarks all the time, didn't you? When you were a little boy? My mother always talked about them. They were very, just like my grandmother on my father's side. It was a marriage like that too. What are you laughing about? He doesn't remember that.
But
Mommy-
these two have to go to work tomorrow.
Okay, Sal, it's
We
historic.
can
And
see
Elon,
that.
are you bored or tired?
No.
No?
Yeah.
Okay. What
Okay.
you can think in your mind how she came to this conclusion. I think I told Stephen about it. My mother was pregnant with Sally. And my mother was very sick. She got some kind of a sickness, I don't know what it was, but she got very sick and very thin. And she always used to ask my father to take her back. He promised he would take her home to see her mother. Her mother was sick and came to England every year to take baths. She was a very sick woman. She went all over to Germany. They're rich people in France, all over. And my father got letters from my grandmother. And my grandmother wrote to my mother and she said, "My darling daughter, I am very sick and I'm going to die very soon. Grandpa will let you know. Maybe you can come to see me. I'm ailing very fast." My father had that letter, and then when the letters came that she died, he hid everything. He wouldn't let her see it. She said, "Look, I'm getting dressed in black. I'm getting dressed all black. And here's little baby Sally, who's got born, and my
Was she
mother
pregnant
was
with-
still.
was
She's
she
pregnant with Sally.
Yeah, that's why I didn't
And
want to
after
just
she
do the
gave
letter.
birth, she was in black. My father said, "Ann, you're crazy. There's nothing like that at all. Grandma didn't die. My mother didn't. Your mother did not die. Where'd you get that from?" She said, "Look, don't tell me my mother didn't die. I know my mother died." And so she, like I said, then my mother confronted him again after Sally was born. My mother confronted him again. She said, "I know my mother died. I'll never forgive you as long as you live. I will always
As
love
long as
you."
he lives.
Huh? As long as she lives. That's what I said. As long as she lives. She would never forgive him for doing that to her, not letting her know about her mother. And he said, "Ann, Sally you were very sick and you were going to have a baby. I didn't want to aggravate you." He admitted it. And she said, "But you promised me every year you're going to take me to see my mother, and I never will see my mother again." And that hurt her so much. And then she also started thinking about me growing up and my brothers, that there's no Jewish boys or girls. My mother had a wonderful Jewish heart. She wanted to stay Jewish. She didn't want any intermarriage. So she said, my uncles, my mother had 5 uncles, and they all came here about 150 years ago. They were all, I saw the picture when I went to
I mean, she
Washington.
had 5 brothers.
5 brothers. Not my grandmother. My mother's mother had 5 brothers.
That's what I'm saying.
And they one was more educated than the other. They all had wonderful education. My grandfather and his great-grandfather, all were educated, all artists, all very famous. They invented planes. One invented a plane that went to France, a part of the plane. Everyone, there's ballet dancers and instructors, every phase of artistic,
Amazing.
anything artistic. And my mother said, and they wrote to my mother, they all had wonderful farms, big farms. And they said, "Ann, this would be a good chance for you to come to this country. Men can buy a farm, and you have everything you want." She used to cry and say, "My children are growing up, I don't know what, we can't get," even when my brother had a bris, it took days before they came. And when the baby was born or anything, we never could get anybody. My mother never could get anybody to come. It took a long, long time before. It wasn't completely, my father just started, it wasn't completely built. Now and then all Boers and Afrikaners mixed in, very few Jews, very, very few Jews. So, can you hear me? And you,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
am I facing the wrong way?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Fine.
So my father said to my mother that he would, well, when we get a chance, we'll go. So my father went to 23rd Street and got an hotel suite, and my mother was to follow.
What year was it?
It was about 1917, I think, or 18, something like that, huh?
I don't know, I'm not sure.
Well, that
how old
makes
I am.
Nineteen, you always said 1917,
Yeah, 1970.
16 or 17.
Yeah, it was that around that time. The war was just starting.
No, it wasn't.
It was in the middle, and we heard, when we were little kids, we stopped in England. We stayed in England for quite a while. And my mother brought these two girls with her. But what happened while my mother was on the train going to,
The two girls were Bushmen.
yeah, they were Bushmen. But my mother treated them, their mother died, and she begged my mother and father to take, she said, they have no one in the world but you, and you were so good to me. Would you take care of my little children, my children? So my mother took them, and she said she wouldn't leave them. She took them with her. And she also took Elizabeth, the girl that my mother gave birth to me and to Sally, all the children. She was like a maternity nurse. And she took her along with her. And when the train stopped in Johannesburg, she got out. She had a boyfriend waiting for her that used to come to Mama's house all the time and stay. He was related to us. This guy was related to the family. And when he came to visit my mother, he was such a nice man. And meanwhile, he was in love with her, and he promised her
In
he was
love
going
with
to marry her.
Elizabeth.
Huh?
Elizabeth.
Yes.
He was in love with Elizabeth.
Yeah, we don't know.
That's right. And my mother said, well, all right, anyway, she's taking the girls with her. And she would take, forget about Elizabeth. She's gone. She got off there. And he was waiting for her. They got married. He was Jewish, and she was Dutch.
Dolly, after this story,
They came to America, and that's, my mother came and met him. My father started investing money in farms, and everything flopped. And then she lost her son. And Henry writes in a book. Did you read Henry's book? Henry Gurnall? He writes things about them, why they went back. And my mother said that, my mother never said she was going back. My mother didn't say that. She wanted to start raising her children in this country until my little brother died. She didn't know him. That was the end of that. That's why they were here.
I think you have to get up tomorrow.
Nancy, which is not,
Here, this one's cherry.
I just want a tiny piece.
Oh,
Where's
there's the
knife?
cheese.
Yeah.
It wasn't in the other one.
Oh.
See, it's not.
Cheese.
Do you see the cheese in there? Okay. There's cheese in there.
This is
Did
good.
you pass the
So
knife?
before you pass the knife, please.
All right, just 1 second. I'll just cut this.
Tiniest little piece of it.
You're in camera,
This is
people.
cheese.
So,
The other side.
I know.
No, that's the wrong side of the knife.
This is good. Very good.
You can put that in the
You didn't
bag.
have any filling there.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, this one has filling, I think.
I know.
Oh, I
ah,
guess
can
it's
they?
apple and,
Cheese, I
It's
think.
very sweet. It's good.
I don't ever have anything with
Right.
record.
Turn the whole butter up?
No.
more
Throwing the
filling,
bakery's
right?
good.
yeah.
No.
Where's her bag? I'll put
You
it-
know what the flea market stands for? The flea in the flea
Maureen,
market?
do you want any?
What?
Found, lost, and exchanged articles.